Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. We'll give it a couple more minutes to allow folks to join, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon, sir. And we do have a quorum whenever you'd like to get started.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the Transportation Committee meeting of the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. Looks like we have a quorum online and in the meeting. And it's now 4:02. I call the meeting to order. And I will go ahead and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today. So if you could please rise and face the flag. We will go forward. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Alex, could you go over the Zoom functions for us, please?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, members of the committee. It's great to see everybody. Just as a friendly reminder, this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube for our members of the public and external stakeholders. So a recording of this meeting will be available afterwards. Speaking of the Zoom meeting instructions, I'm sure that we're all very familiar with our instructions, but just as a friendly reminder, committee members can use the raise hand button when you would like to speak or ask a question. And attendees in the Zoom meeting can submit questions via the Q&A chat box towards the bottom of the screen. And our staff will call on the committee members and announce submitted questions in the order that they received. And for members of the public who are on the Zoom call, to provide a verbal public comments, click on the raise hand button towards the beginning of the agenda item that you would like to comment on, and our staff will call on you. Please know that verbal public comments are limited to 3 minutes each. That concludes instructions, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. And then please go ahead and conduct the roll call.
Yes, sir. All right. For voting members, please make sure that your mic is not muted at this time. We'll now proceed with the roll call votes, or roll call, excuse me. City of Alhambra. Claremont?
Yes.
Diamond Bar?
Present.
Duarte? Glendora?
Here.
Industry?
Here.
La Cañada Flindridge? Monterey Park?
Here.
Pasadena?
Here.
Pomona?
Here.
San Gabriel?
Here.
South El Monte?
Here.
South Pasadena? Temple City? Walnut?
Hi, Alan Wu is here.
Thank you very much. LA County District 1?
Here.
Thank you very much. LA County District 4?
Here. Thanks.
Thank you. LA County District 5?
Here.
Thank you very much. We do have a quorum, sir.
Great. Thank you all again for making the time to attend the meeting. This time we'll go over any general public comments. Alex, have you received any general public comments for the meeting?
We did not receive any general public comments, but we do have attendees in the Zoom call. So we'll give a few seconds to see if any of them would like to provide a verbal public comments. All right, seeing none, I think we're good to proceed, sir.
Excellent, thank you. Do any of the committee members have any requests to order changes for the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move forward with the agenda. So first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Just give a couple minutes for folks to review it. As part of the consent, I'm serving again as chair of the Transportation Committee and Ed Reese as vice chair. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this committee and to help set the agenda and move things forward. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Chair Pu, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move approval.
Thank you.
Sandoval, second.
Excellent. Okay, motion and second. I believe, Alex, do we have to also see if there's any public comment on the item before
Yes,
we take the vote? Okay.
Yes, we would have to. We didn't receive any written public comments for the consent calendar, and we'll see if there are any verbal public comment requests for this item. All right, I don't think we have any.
Okay, great. There's a motion and a second on the table. Alex, please take the roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Voting members, there's a motion on the table to approve the consent calendar, which includes the approval of the minutes from the previous meetings and electing our fiscal year 21 to 22 chair and vice chair. Please make sure your mic is not muted at this time, and we'll proceed with the roll call votes. Alhambra, Claremont?
Yes.
Diamond Bar,
Yes.
Guardi, Glendora,
Yes.
Industry,
Yes.
La Cañada Flintridge, Monterey Park,
Yes.
Pasadena,
Yes.
Pomona,
Yes.
San Gabriel,
Yes.
South El Monte, South El Monte, South Pasadena, Temple City, Walnut,
Yes.
LA County District 1,
Yes.
LA County District 4,
Yes.
LA County District 5.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. The motion passes, and congratulations, sir.
Thank you. And thank you to all the members for their vote of confidence in the direction that we're heading in here with the Transportation Committee. I'm looking forward to getting a lot more things done. We'll have a preview today later too of the San Gabriel Valley Transit Feasibility Study, which we have launched. With that,
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, I just echo Chair Pu's comments and say thank you very much in your confidence of this leadership team, and look forward to the coming year.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. And also for needing to sit in one time when I couldn't make a meeting at the last minute earlier in the year. So with that, Alex, let's go to the first action item. So we'll have a review here of the Metro's strategic project list. And Alex, I believe you are the presenter. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. We don't have any written public comments, but we'll give a few seconds to see if there are any verbal public comment requests on this item. All right, seeing none, I think we're good to proceed. All right, good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you so much for allowing our staff to present on the Metro's strategic project list to you all. And we're gonna go through just some background on how this list came about and briefly go through the requests that we've received. So just in summary, Metro adopted the long-range transportation plan last year to provide a detailed roadmap for guiding Metro's plan to build, operate, maintain, and partner for improved mobility over the next 3 decades. And included in the long-range transportation plan is the development of the short-range transportation plan. And that plan includes a 10 to 15-year action plan that contains the strategic project list. So the strategic project list includes a list of planned but unfunded major transportation projects and approved transportation programs submitted to Metro from any of the 9 COGs in LA County. The Metro strategic project list has 2 major components. The first one being the major project components, and that is a list of defined projects that support transit, railway, bicycle, and pedestrian travel and goods movement. The second component is the programs component. And that includes the capital investments in transportation programs that have been approved by a sub-regional COG in LA County. So Metro did state that the strategic project list, it is not a prioritized list, and it is not tied to existing funding sources or any specific future funding sources. And additionally, only projects of regional transportation significance should be included on the list. Local transportation projects may be eligible for the multi-year sub-regional program or MSP funding or local return funding, regardless of their listing on the strategic project list. And a project included in the strategic project list does not commit Metro or the COGs to fund the project, but just having a list of up-to-date, like having an up-to-date project list will be very beneficial for Metro's regional planning efforts and just identifying the county's overall transportation and funding needs. And that list is also very helpful for the COG because our staff can include these projects in earmark requests, or when we apply for additional grants, we also know what type of projects our cities would like to fund. So just having this information is very helpful. So there's actually a lot of ways for projects or program to be eligible to be placed on this list. Over the next 2 or 3 slides, we're gonna go over a series of bullet points. But essentially, if a transportation project or program meets one of these criteria, then it is eligible to be placed on the Metro strategic project list. And Metro specifically have broken the projects down by category and by tiers, just to better help their staff organize the projects. But essentially under transit project tier 1s, that includes all light rail, heavy rail, commuter rail, streetcar, and dedicated right-of-way bus rapid transit or BRT projects, gray set projects for existing fixed guideway transit lines. And under transit projects tier 2, that includes the purchase of electric or other zero emission buses. For active transportation and complete streets tier 1 projects, that includes class 1 multi-use or class 4 cycle tracks that are greater than 3 miles in length or that cross multiple jurisdictions, complete streets projects that cross multiple jurisdictions, and new pedestrian and bicycle overcrossings and underpasses. For active transportation and complete streets tier 2 projects, that just includes class 1 multi-use paths or class 4 cycle tracks that provide direct access to fixed guideway transit. And I know that over the next few minutes, I'm gonna go over a lot of information really quickly, but in case if you want to revisit, this information is in the agenda packet within the staff report. So on to the next category is the highway projects tier 1s. That includes any new high occupancy toll lanes or upgrades to existing facilities or additions to HOV lanes, as well as new interchange or direct connectors. For highway projects tier 2, that includes new auxiliary lanes, multi-jurisdictional arterial improvement projects, or countywide or sub-region-wide ITS projects. And then for goods movements projects tier 1s, that just includes general gray sub projects and dedicated truck facilities or truck toll facilities. For goods movement projects tier 2, that just includes projects that occurs on a countywide strategic truck arterial network. And finally, this is my favorite, projects of any mode, tier 1, but that's just the only tier. So any defined transportation projects with a project cost that exceeds $50 million, you are eligible to be placed on this list. And that can be anything, to be honest. We covered the major projects component, and then this is for the approved projects component of this list. So eligible projects for the strategic project list approved programs components includes transportation programs that have been approved by the Metro Board, our governing board, or another entity on behalf of multiple jurisdictions. So these programs must be related to transportation by increasing the mobility of individuals or goods, reducing conflicts, increasing safety, and eliminating the need for travel. And such programs must result in future capital projects. So why are we bringing this to the committee's attention is because Metro recently requested all of the COGs to submit eligible projects and programs for inclusion on the strategic project list by June 30th, so the end of this month. And each project to be included on the list must be submitted to Metro with the appropriate request form, which for every single request that we have received, and we'll go over them in a bit, their staff or their city staff did submit them with the appropriate request form. For that, we're very grateful for city's cooperation. So upon just examining the eligibility criteria, our COG staff has identified a preliminary list of projects to be recommended for inclusion. And these includes a lot of grade separation projects that our capital project side are working on. And that includes Montebello Boulevard grade separation in the city of Montebello, the Turnbull Canyon Road grade separation project in Industry, as well as the Maple Avenue pedestrian overhead crossing in Montebello, the Pomona at grade crossing safety project in the city of Pomona. Then there's also the SR 5760, the famous project, the Confluence Choke Point Relief Project in Diamond Bar. And we also included the I-605 Valley Boulevard interchange improvement in Industry, the Laverne's transit-oriented development pedestrian bridge in the city of Laverne. In addition to the Foothill Gold Line extension project, and also the Arrow Highway multi-modal regional corridor improvements. And the Arrow Highway improvement plan was recently reviewed by the Transportation Committee last month. So the Arrow Highway improvements would include all of the improvements that are recommended within that plan. I do want to note that in our staff reports, the Foothill Gold Line extension project was listed with an estimated cost of $465 million. We do apologize for that typo because we did consult with the Gold Line staff and it was corrected and revised to $525.5 million, as stated on the screen here. So due to the short turnaround time set forth by Metro, our staff solicited feedback from our member cities for additional eligible projects and programs that can be included in the list. So we reached out to members of the Transportation Committee, including you all, as well as our Public Works Technical Advisory Committee and our Planning Directors Technical Advisory Committee. Multiple reminders were shared with the committee members to solicit their feedback or project requests. So as a result, on top of the projects that our COG staff have recommended, an additional 29 requests were submitted. So, and this is just a quick snapshot of what we request the cities to fill out or agencies to fill out if they would like to submit a project or program request. So we're gonna go over the additional requests really quickly just for your reference. The city of Diamond Bar submitted a project for westbound SR 60 direct connected to Grand Avenue, and that was estimated at $290 million 4 years ago. The city of Glendora submitted proposals for their transit fleet electrification and people movement projects. Pasadena submitted quite a lot of projects, including the Allen Avenue Safety Project for their design and construction phases, the Pasadena Transit Maintenance Facility, implementation of their Bicycle Transportation Action Plan, the Bus Stop Improvement Program, North Lake Avenue Safety Project, but just for the design and construction components, purchase and replacement and expansion buses for Pasadena Transit and Pasadena Dial a Ride, and replacing aging bus stop shelters. Additionally, Pasadena also submitted project proposals for the Rosemont Avenue Complete Streets project, the Royal Link, and their citywide transportation performance monitoring network. South Pass also submitted quite a lot of projects. They're all active transportation projects on their local streets, including improvements on Meridian Avenue, Garfield Avenue, Fremont Avenue, Monterey Road and Pasadena Avenue, Huntington Drive, Columbia Street, and Mission Street. And finally, the County of LA also submitted 3 project proposals, including their fleet electrification for their San Gabriel Valley subregion, the Amar Road Complete Streets project, and the San Jose Creek Regional Access Project. Arcadia recently also submitted one project proposal for the Colorado Street Complete Streets project. And the city of Alhambra submitted 5 project proposals, including their citywide ACT bus ridership study, the bus shelter replacements, pedestrian safety countdown signal heads, and also the fixed transit route electrification, including related infrastructure, and the EV charging stations. So I believe that's all of the projects that the project requests that we've received. So it is important to note that the cities of Pasadena and South Pass, their projects are also included in the Arroyo Verdugo JPA's proposed list, given that those 2 cities are part of both COGS. And just for your reference, the timeline for how this is going to work is that we gave all of our member cities and agencies until May 24th to provide the information for project requests. We also briefed our city managers recently last week just to keep them in the loop with all of the requests. Today is the Transportation Committee's opportunity to review, and we will request the committee to make the recommendation for the governing board to adopt this list. So if all goes well, following governing board's adoption, our staff will submit the list to Metro before the end of this month. And the details of each project and program can be found on our websites at this link. We did consider including them in the agenda packet, but that would turn our agenda packet to over 500 pages. So details of each of the projects can be found on this link here. And our recommended action is for the committee to recommend the governing board to adopt a list of San Gabriel Valley regional transportation projects and programs to be included on the strategic project list. And our staff just recognized that this is a pretty short turnaround time for our cities. So we did reach out to Metro and ask for additional opportunities to add additional requests later on. And their staff, thankfully, did state that as long as our governing board approves additional requests, they can be added to the list at any time. So with that, that concludes our presentation. I'm here to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. I think I'd like to first see if Director Sandoval would like to add anything to the presentation, or Mary Lou. You guys both.
Yeah, Jason, this is exciting. So many great projects, and certainly there's not a shortage of projects, but I mean, that's, if anyone wants to talk to me about their projects, I'm certainly happy to listen, but I'm excited for this collaborative, collective effort to try to get these projects going and completed, particularly the one that we've been working on for a long time, which is both the 5760 confluence, which is a real challenge, but also getting that gold line to Claremont and then ultimately to Montclair.
Yes, absolutely. All right, thank you for that, Director Sandoval. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, it's at Stephen from Diamond Bar.
No, Mr. Chair, this is David Luke from Diamond Bar.
Oh, David, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just want to make a couple comments. Earlier on the presentation, Alex, you had a slide that showed the $450 million estimated cost for the 5760 Confluence Choke Point Relief Program. And I just want to note that for the most part, this project is basically almost fully funded. It's been a multi-year, multi-phase approach from a financial strategic point of view, but more importantly, we've made a lot of progress, and of course, we're still there's still some funding shortfall, approximately about 30 million in construction. So I just want to make sure the committee is aware that don't be alarmed by that 450 million. That 400 million includes everything from the environmental studies that we performed or Caltrans completed years ago, as well as the design work and right-of-way costs. So the good news is that we've come a long way, but more importantly, on the construction schedule, the full funds, the funding gap of 30 million can be filled, that we can see the construction starting August 2022. As recently as a couple months ago, we submitted the earmark request to our Congresswoman Young Kim, working with our partnering city industry, as well as Metro and Caltrans. So we're very hopeful that that we'll hear some progress as well. So that $450 million is a very high price tag project, but more importantly, we've come a long way. And the second list that Alex presented in terms of the project submitted by Diamond Bar, we believe that project is on Metro's Measure M, but because the confluence area was basically very challenging for the engineers, we more than a decade ago, it was decided that the westbound weaving issue, and specifically I'm talking about southbound 57 and westbound 60, there's a weaving conflict, and also there's a missing component. Long story short, we partnered with SCAG and Metro and the state, and after completing a supplemental needs study, it was agreed that a westbound direct connector to the Grand Avenue could help alleviate that westbound weaving issue. Currently, if you're going westbound on 16 and you want to get up at Grand Avenue, you got to weave across 3 lanes because of the southbound 57 traffic movement. So this is something that we want to make sure it's on somebody's radar screen, and definitely this list should help us continue to make sure that Metro and the state is not forgetting about this particular weaving issue that has been plaguing us for decades. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, David.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your comments, David. And it's great to hear that 5760 has been mostly funded. The interesting part about the Metro strategic project list, even though the focus is on the unfunded projects, they actually, on the request form, they actually didn't request cities to input the project amounts, like the project budget. So when we requested cities to include the estimated project is for the COG staff's understanding, so that when we advocate for project funding later on, we have a good idea of how much to request from the COG staff's perspective. So we're certainly happy to adjust that on our ends. And even though the project is mostly funded, as long as a portion of it is unfunded, that should be eligible to be placed on the Metro list.
Okay.
Excuse me, Jason?
Yes, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Thank you, I'm finally in. I think what's also important to notice that since these are unfunded projects, we need to pay particular close attention to both the markups that were done for both the House and the Senate markups that are pretty close together comparatively. The San Gabriel Valley did extremely well, particularly in the goods area movement. Paul here can definitely add to that, so that there are funds in those that may be coming forth in the future. So we have to pay particular attention to those and see what happens. Because more likely than not, Metro will also be the pass-through for those funds.
Got it. So in other words, even though those would be federal funds that might be coming down the pipeline, Metro would be the distributing agency?
They could or could not. Some of them could be actually direct, but usually they give groups of the recipients or certain areas funds, and then those get dispersed. At other times, things, for example, because of the with goods movement and the Alameda Corridor East projects, those are direct. The same thing could happen. We'd have to clear environmentally the Gold Line to Claremont and Montclair and get a federal environmental clearance to be a recipient for those funds. Those may or may not be passed through to Metro. A lot of these others, some of the highway things and others can pass through Metro. I'm just saying we need to get the money into the county and then make sure that we get it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you. Sorry about the phone.
No worries. I have a couple of follow-up questions. Alex, you mentioned that the briefing was provided to the city manager's TAC last week. Did the Public Works TAC also have an opportunity to look at this and weigh in with suggested projects?
Unfortunately not, because of the short turnaround time. I believe all we were able to do is to provide an announcement at the previous Public Works TAC meeting, because the last Public Works TAC meeting happened before the end of the submission deadline.
Okay. And what do we yet know what the process will be to potentially add projects to the list? If if Metro staff has said that we could amend the list at any time, do we have any idea of what that timeline would be and or what the process would be?
I think from the COG staff perspective, certainly we can revisit this either like every quarter or every half a year, but whenever there's a need for cities to add to this list, we can certainly accommodate that and bring the request to either like the Public Works TAC or the Transportation Committee. If it comes from the Public Works TAC, that can be a recommendation from the Public Works TAC to the Transportation Committee, and then the Transportation Committee can make the final recommendations to recommend the governing boards to include the project or not.
Okay. Generally speaking, as funds become available and as different projects qualify, or when there is a need, as Alex mentioned, for example, the Measure M sub-regional funds that were approved for the change of the San Gabriel Valley at last month's board meeting. That's not any particular cycle. It was time to do it at that point in time so that agendas don't get too loaded. The schedule has not yet come out. Part of it is we have our new CEO that just started 10 days ago, CEO Stephanie Wiggins. So she gets in and is taking a look at things. Once the LRT was approved last year, then staff started doing the work to do the short range transportation plan. And part of that process is going out and asking our subregions what projects do they want to see. Roll into those, whether they're to make sure that it's in it, because once it's unfunded, as long as it's in the plan, then you can start moving towards the money. So that we call it the coloring of money. When as funds shift around and some projects get delayed or removed, other funds become available. And that's when it's important that we always are ready, and that the more project ready you have a project, the easier it is to get the money. So there will be a schedule, but basically anytime you're ready to go, you should push for it.
Got it. Any other comments or questions? This list here is fairly heavy with City of Pasadena projects, and I think some for South Pass as well. And Alex, you mentioned that they are part of two different COG subregions. Not that I think there's a conflict, but what is the effect of two separate subregions then having the same projects on their list? Does that, in some sense, give them any kind of super priority or additional preference, or sort of political sway?
That's not really from our staff's perspective. But from their city's perspective, it does show that there's like support from both COGs for their projects. So it does look good for them. But in terms of prioritizations, no, we don't really see that happening.
I really wish that South Pass and Pasadena's representatives were in the meeting so that they could sort of speak to some of those projects a little bit. But I see Laura Corneo with her hand up. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Happy to answer any questions. I think to the question you just asked, as Alex indicated, it doesn't necessarily mean that we get any extra points or, we're leveraging one JPA over, against the COG. I think we're members of both COGs or both organizations. And I, at least on my end, consulted with Alex and indicated we had already submitted through the JPA. Should we also submit under the San Gabriel Valley COG? We were encouraged to do so. But again, I think to Alex's point, this isn't a prioritization list. It doesn't mean that we get extra points because we've submitted to both. It just means we have projects that could benefit both subregions. And so we've submitted the list accordingly.
Okay. All right. So, because there is a June 30th deadline, I do think we should move forward and vote on this action item. But I do have a feeling that many of our cities in the San Gabriel Valley may not have had the opportunity to fully participate and maybe really sort of dig deep into the unfunded projects that they may have that might be eligible for this type of list. So I'm sure it's something that we can revisit in the future to make sure that the needs and priorities of all of our agencies and cities, are being addressed, and we'll hopefully get some funding, later on down the line. There's already some big projects on this list that do need to fill the gap in terms of the funding. But there's also some smaller projects too. I noticed that some are, local studies that might be $300,000 worth. So it seems like there's quite a few, different local projects that could be funded through some of these this strategic project list. Any other comments or questions? Okay. With that, does anybody have any issue with any of the projects that are on the list? This doesn't look like it. Is there? Then I'll ask for a motion to approve the project list, to recommend it for adoption at the board meeting next week.
Motion to approve as read, Gloria.
Thank you, Gloria. Is there a second?
Moss Industry will second.
Thank you, Corey. All right, Alex, please take the roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Voting members, there's a motion on the table to approve or to recommend the governing board to adopt the list of San Gabriel Valley transportation projects and programs to be included on the Metro Strategic Project list. Please make sure that your mic is not muted at this time, and we'll now proceed with the roll call votes. Alhambra, Claremont?
Yes.
Diamond Bar?
Yes.
Duarte? Glendora?
Yes.
Industry?
Yes.
La Cuneta Flambridge? Monterey Park?
Yes.
Pasadena?
Yes.
Pomona? Pomona?
Pomona's a yes.
Thank you very much. San Gabriel?
Yes.
South El Monte?
Yes.
South Pasadena? Temple City? Walnut?
Yes.
LA County District 1? LA
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. LA County District 4?
Yes.
LA County District 5?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. The motion passes.
Great, thank you all. Next item, please. This is an update on our San Gabriel Valley Transit Feasibility Study, and COG staff Eric Shen will be giving the presentation. Please take it away.
Very good afternoon, Chair Pu and the members of the committee. And Alex, you're going to be my co-pilot, so
yes,
please
sir.
advance to next slide. I'm very pleased to provide the committee an update on the San Gabriel Valley Transit Feasibility Study, the project status. And for some members who may not be familiar with the transit study, I will highlight what the objectives, and before we get into where we are in terms of the project status. So the project was developed and with a very strong support, and I like to also acknowledge Mary Lou, who has been one of the movers and shakers in securing the funding for San Gabriel Valley COG to move this project forward. And the project outlined at the very beginning, outlined 3 specific objectives. The first one is to identify and analyze the mobility needs for the San Gabriel Valley that are not currently or will not be served in the future by the GO Line and Metrolink rail system. I think that's a very important reminder. And I will have an illustration right after this slide. Secondly, is the study will identify all existing modes of travel and travel demand and determine where gaps are and develop transit solutions, both for near term and the long term. The options that will be examined will include, but not limited to, BRT or Bus Rapid Transit, BRT, light rail transit, LRT, or diesel electric motorized units, or even monorail. Next, please. This map illustrates where the existing light rail and also metro rail system throughout San Gabriel Valley. And this is a map that was provided, included as part of the Kimley-Horn proposal. And I do believe this is a good illustration to show that while San Gabriel Valley has very robust and good connections east-west, it is clear to most residents in the valley that the southern portion of San Gabriel Valley, as well as northeast, north-south connections, are worthy of our further exploration in terms of providing a better connected transit service for our residents. Next, please. So the transit study, feasibility study, is structured into two distinct yet interconnected components. The first component is on the technical analyses, and second component is the public outreach services. After a very robust request for proposals, interviews, and review, we selected Kimley-Horn and Associates for being the prime consultant to lead the technical analyses. For the technical analyses, I will serve as principal in charge, and on the Kimley-Horn's team, Brent Ogden, who is a very well-respected transit expert, is serving as the project manager. As part of the Kimley-Horn's team, WSP, TransLink, and CTG are their expert sub-consultants. On the public outreach service side of it, which public outreach services is a critical and complementary element of the technical analyses. My colleague, Paul Hubler, will serve as principal in charge, managing the public outreach service consultants. The prime consultant for the work is Hill International. The project manager is Claudia Magia, and supporting her are sub-consultants from Consensus and Imprenta. We have scheduled our kickoff meeting on July 9th of this year. The performance period is going to be 12 months. Next, please. I would like to highlight the key tasks as part of the technical analyses, as well as for by the public outreach consultants. The work to be performed by Kimley-Horn will include a very robust definition on the baseline, and also to develop initial screening and evaluation criteria, as we have very large areas to tackle. The technical consultants will then explore and develop concepts and alternatives and perform in-depth ridership forecasts. They will also estimate different costs based on different alternatives. And then towards the end of this particular phase, they will then help us narrow down to up to 3 alternatives for in-depth feasibility. On the public outreach side of it, our consultants will support our technical team every step of the way. But 2 very distinct yet very important functions for the public outreach consultants are to engage our community. In addition, our public outreach team will conduct meetings with key stakeholders, including electives and local advocacies, to ensure those technical options would be feasible and acceptable by the community. Next, please. That concludes my very high-level project update. It is our intent to periodically provide updates to all committees as requested. We are also very open to suggestions, guidelines, especially once the project is kicked off, we would like to ensure that we continue to collect inputs and keeping you up to date so that you could also be the proponent of this feasibility study. And with that, I'm going to yield my time back to Chair Pu.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And Alex, I had forgotten to ask for if there was any public comment on this item at the beginning of the presentation. Did you receive any public comments for this?
No public comments received, and we can give a few seconds to see if there are any members of the public who would like to comment. Seeing none, we're good to proceed.
Okay, thank you. All right, first we have Mary Lou.
Yes, if you could take me back to your first screen. I don't see page numbers on here. Okay, when you talk about, with this one about the mobility needs, and it's this one in the map on the following page, and they talk about the only service you refer to as the San Gabriel Valley is the Gold Line and Metrolink. And then if you look over on the next map, the next page, please. And then on here, when you talk about, you're talking about Metrolink, and what you're leaving off is, if you could add in the express lanes, and you also have the service being provided on the busway, both the Foothill, the Silver Streak, and Metro Silver Line. But I think that we need to make sure that we include those as service in the area, so that we don't eliminate them because people think it's not there.
Mary Lou, thank you very much for the comment. I'll make sure as we develop our future materials, we'll identify those existing services, and we won't leave them out. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks.
Okay. Peter Chan from Monterey Park.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Shin, for the presentation. And my question is, need to be all the cities involved in the San Gabriel Valley COG need to be involved in this. But do you have a timeline? When will the public outreach is going to happen, and how will it be happening?
And thank you for the question. As I indicated, our kickoff meeting is set for July 9th, where both teams of consultants will be meeting, and we will begin consolidating and also lining up all of our project schedule. And I also indicated the study period is 12 months. So as soon as we develop our technical, as soon as we verify and confirm all of the technical tests, we will then ensuring our public outreach schedule will match up. And that is where we can then share the project schedule with committee members if you're interested. And we definitely would ensure that we remind our public outreach consultants as part of their outreach to ensure city representatives are engaged and also informed, and also your inputs are collected.
Okay, thank you. Make sure to connect to me, City of Monterey Park, for additional input, and we would like to understand more on the projects.
Great, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Yes, I think when the time comes, we should reach out to all of the cities as part of the COG to gauge if there's interest in hosting one of those community outreach meetings, as we all have public space where we could, potentially provide a forum or a venue, for those meetings. I think that a lot of cities would be, really interested in participating and offering up that kind of space. Corey Moss from City of Industry.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I apologize. Question, and I apologize. I'm kind of doing a couple of things right here, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. But was the funding from Metro expected to cover the cost of any of the project or just the study?
Currently, there's $1.5 million allocated for the feasibility study itself. And as we reported to the governing board, at the time the technical consultant contract was issued, the funding available, the funding that has been budgeted is only available sufficient for us to complete a portion of this feasibility study. So there has been additional discussion with Metro staff at the time when this feasibility study enters into a latter stage where we have more, we have actual feasible alternatives for deeper analyses. That is where we're going to have consultants complete and revalidate the estimate on completing the entire project. And then Metro staff, we will be working with Metro staff and engage with Metro to seek additional funding allocation to complete the feasibility study. And Mayor Moss, to answer your question, the alignment or the options that eventually that will come out of this feasibility study will then go through a standard and a robust environmental analysis, and then the options and the cost for those options will then be developed, and then if they are feasible, then we will then promote those options to be placed on Metro's project list. So it will be a while before a package of projects to be added to a future funding for those projects. I hope that explained. I hope that answered your question.
Can I add a little point, please, Eric?
Certainly, Mary Lou.
Thank you very much, and Chair Pu. Yes. Initially, the feeling was between Metro and COG staff is that 1.5 million would be enough to do a transportation study, and that's when it was budgeted and approved by the board at 1.5 million. Unfortunately, as more information became available, as most projects will happen, that was not going to be enough money to do a study where you would have a good end product and some alternative projects to move forward. So it was at that time that in working with the Metro's planning department, that they are fully well aware and are committed to having a study that will bring us a project, which, as Eric said, that simply means that when they do come back for additional work, that this will be a 2-year funding project. So we'll have to go through this again next year for additional funds to be able to complete the study. And then subsequent to that, look for the money to fund those projects. But this is all part of the funds that were made available through our share of the extension, eastern extension of the GO line. So those funds, there are funds available that belong to the San Gabriel Valley for this eastward extension. So
thank you for that. I have one more quick thing I wanted to ask, and I think we've discussed this once before, back I think when we were actually voting on initiating this study, is that the Public Works TAC could continue to be involved in this study, and if that is actually, can we make sure that that's occurring?
I will make a note of it, and I think given the strong interest that the entire valley, the entire region has shown, we fully understand that we need to have very robust and equitable outreach activities so that the voices are collected, and also the voices are balanced to guide the development of the project. So I'll take your input and make sure the public outreach service consultants will incorporate into their outreach schedule so that we'll come back to you with a very transparent, equitable, and also effective communication outreach.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you for the question. And actually, Mary Lou, if I might clarify what you just said, then, because I did also think that a 12-month study period was fairly ambitious to be able to do both the technical analysis and the community outreach. were you just saying that we are already anticipating that this will be more of a 2-year process, but we would have to see what funding is available to continue the study next year? I think, I mean, that's how I interpreted it, but I just wanted to be sure if that's correct.
Part of the difficulty is that initially, with a COG number, an estimate of 1.5 million to complete the study, which included public outreach, et cetera. And so the COG had one number in mind. Metro staff had a scope of work in mind. The scope of work that Metro had outlined would require far more funds than 1.5 million. Those are probably on the level of 2.5 to 3 million, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. So that rather than delay the possibilities, we could go ahead and start now. We have the opportunity to do a mid-year budget adjustment. We're starting this year. We start preparation for our budgets in January at the beginning of each year, so that we won't have a complete study within a year. It's too much work and there aren't enough funds to do it. And the goal is to have, in the scope of work, we want to have some solid recommendations that are workable solutions to this alternative. So that we have an excellent start right now. And as we move forward, and I love the term to shake it out, start shaking it out and seeing what we're looking at. And then you can modify that list, and depending on the information that you get in the upcoming months, then you can adjust your work and we'll have a better idea on what the right number is. I still believe it's 2.5 to 3 million for a solid study, but we will see. And Metro staff is committed to doing that. But COG staff did an excellent job getting us at this point and getting the contract underway. But it's fully anticipated that we won't have the complete study, as Eric mentioned, but we will have, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. At least we know what it's going to start looking like within the next few months. And then we can fill in the rest of the pieces. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think I personally agree of, getting started, and because the transportation and transit needs throughout the valley vary greatly, within the valley. And I think that, I agree, we want to have well thought out and actually feasible projects to propose to Metro by the time this is all said and done. And and I believe that Mary Lou, you and Eric may have, been working with the Metro staff to have this a sort of expanded scope of the study, so that we could address as many needs as we possibly can of the entire San Gabriel Valley, rather than having a sort of narrow and limited scope of what we would be looking at. The fact that north-south in addition to east-west would be considered, and that there's going to be robust community outreach and so forth and so on. I think that those are all encouraging aspects of the study. So thank you very much for all of that.
Well, thank you for pushing as hard as you did. It's always nice to have backup.
Yes,
so
and
thank you.
I wanted to ask too, though, then is this the 1.5, is it coming from Metro general funds, do you know, or is this part of the Measure R allotment?
That's coming from our Measure R allotment.
Okay.
I believe.
You believe. So, I mean, additional funds too, I mean, could also, I guess at the time that becomes necessary, we could either see if there is Metro general funds or other funds available versus the Measure R allotment for the San Gabriel Valley, correct?
The benefit of the motion was done to preserve those funds for the San Gabriel Valley. It means a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
Those funds cannot be shifted to another region. The benefit of them being the Measure R dollars as opposed to Measure M dollars, those Measure R dollars have been there and collecting. So I think those funds will be much more, be easier to get a hold of
Absolutely.
To go through projects, because those were our funds. And the Measure R, because they can't say, oh, these funds are for 2050, because Measure R actually ends in 2030. 2030. Boy, how time flies. So that it's great to have Measure R dollars on this project. It's very, very good. Just like the $710 of Measure R dollars. But we do have to watch it. And in addition to that, we don't know what additional funds may or may not be coming down. So we have to just spend a lot of time just looking and watching. And fortunately, the COG has a good staff to do that. There is a tremendous amount of money that people have planned for that I don't think is in the bank. So, you know, Eagles write checks and the other part of your body has to cash them.
So in partial answer to Mayor Moss's question, when at the time that this study was authorized, it was also in connection with the elimination of the SR60 alignment for the Gold Line East Side extension. And at that time, an amendment was offered and passed that Measure R dollars that were dedicated to the San Gabriel Valley would remain dedicated to San Gabriel Valley and not then be used for that East Side extension, which now will run outside of the valley. And so again, for the benefit of the members and any audience members, I believe that number is something in the $635 million range. Is that correct?
I get it confused with the 710. We had to say that, and it was either one was 635 and one was like 680,
right?
Or vice versa. It's a chunk of change.
It is, and so I mean, you know, not that that difference is even a small difference either of 50 million, but there should be a pool of funds there to at least, you know, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily going to be enough to fund whatever projects are recommended out of the study, but it's something that we can utilize to at least get started. And another reason why I feel like too that the additional funding that may be necessary to fund this study in the next year should not be an issue, obviously, because if the current 1.5 is coming out of the San Gabriel Valley's Measure R funds, then we will always have that to fall back on if we needed additional funds to complete the study.
I remind staff of that on probably about every 2 weeks. But you don't want it to go away. You don't want it to go away. But
no.
And Chair Poole.
Diego Lopez and Lori Lombardi have been absolutely wonderful in recognizing what the situation is. And this wasn't going to be part of the MTA report, so I hope I'm not stepping on Mayor Sandoval's toes. But on July 1st, there will be a new chair of the Metro Board, and that's going to be the Honorable Hilda Solis, who is from the San Gabriel Valley, and will be under her chairmanship that we will be seeking these funds. So personally, I'm not too worried. I'm looking forward to working with that office closely to secure all the funds we need.
Couldn't agree more, and certainly echo those sentiments in working with what will be Chair Solis's office on those things. Eric, did you have something to add?
Right, I wanted to respond to one of your question or concern earlier, and I want to make it really clear that the study itself is very comprehensive. The scope that originally was put out to put through the RFP, request for proposal process, and the contract that is awarded is the incremental building block of the overall study that we asked consultant to examine. What Mary Lou has been very, very helpful in helping us to bridge the conversation with Metro staff is that once we develop those building blocks, which what we call task 1 through task 7, our consultants will have much better understanding as to what are acceptable by the Valley and how deep those technical analyses will be necessary then they can estimate what will be the additional time it takes in year 2 and how much would it cost. And we felt that was a much better approach rather than asking them to give us a 2-year cost proposal. And yet at the same time, there would be a lot of uncertainty until we get to year 1. We really don't know, are we overestimating or are we underestimating? So I think what I wanted to supplement here is we're not doing things piecemeal. In fact, we're doing holistically, but we're taking the building block approach. So I want to reassure you that we feel we pick 2 very good teams, and we have every interest to safeguard the San Gabriel Valley's interest and also balance and respect how this project came about and develop some short-term programs that we can really utilize the available funding that you had just mentioned to turn it into much earlier deployment if possible. So we'll come back to you periodically.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Mayor Moss, I think that your hand was up from the previous question. Is that correct?
It is, yes. I'm sorry. I'll figure out how to lower it right now. I apologize. Oh, there it is. I did it.
No worries. I previously spent entire meetings completely on mute and nobody could hear me and they didn't miss me at all.
Wow.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions. Thank you to Eric, Mary Lou, and the staff for the update. Certainly, I think it's something that is of great interest for all of our cities and the entire San Gabriel Valley. So it should be something that we will revisit from time to time whenever there's updates and things of interest to be able to report to the committee. So next we have a presentation on Glendora first mile, last mile demonstrations. And I believe Mr. Mateer from the city of Glendora is here to present on that item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Pooh, and thank you for the COG. My name is Stephen Mateer. I'm the transportation manager for the city of Glendora. Talking about our first last mile demonstration project that we did in partnership with the COG. Next slide, please. Or Alex, can I control it or is it?
Yeah, let me give you remote control. That
Okay. Okay, so just for background, we'll go over what is first last mile planning. We'll talk about our demonstration project, the results, and what we learned from the project. Here we go. So what is first last mile? First last mile looks at how someone goes from their house to either a bus or stop, and then once they are off their transit trip, how do they reach their final destination, be that work, school, medical trip, shopping. So really, this is the bookends of the trip, and what we found is that this is often one of the biggest barriers to people accessing transit, feeling comfortable, and willing to take a ride on transit. The long-term goals for Glendora is to connect our station to the village. The station that we have in Glendora is actually close to the village, but it's hidden behind a few buildings, and it's not immediately intuitive how to get there. So really making sure that connection's intuitive and safe is really a priority. Also, road safety. We want to have roads that are safe for people of all abilities, all ages. And lastly is economic development and looking at further ways to leverage the energy and the funding that comes with an investment. That's the magnitude of the Gold Line. So the demonstration project, what this is our temporary improvements. These are not intended to be long-term. They're not capital intensive. It is a way to test concepts, and it uses lower cost materials. Funding for this came from the SGV COG via repurposed OpenStreets money. So we're very thankful for the COG to make that money available to us. This helped us also have some outdoor recreation area time for our residents during the COVID lockdowns. And also too, we used a lot of our city bike and ped funds. So the TDA money that each city gets, we use that to fund the design as well as the material costs. One of the big things was to engage the public. We went through the Metro's first last mile planning process. That was about a 2-year process. This allowed us to reach a lot more residents that may have missed that or aren't really comfortable or able to come to public meetings. And we also wanted to understand the operational impacts. You know, it's one thing to see these lines on a map. It's another thing to see it actually on the street, see people driving it, walking it, and biking it. The materials that we used were tape, delineator post, security planters, and we had plants that were loaned to us from Glendora Gardens. And I apologize, I forgot to mention too, in the meeting is Danielle Zamora from Active SGV. They were a really great partner with us. So you can see this is the team that was out there. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into installing it, maintaining it, and then tearing it out. But this was really a great team effort. This project lasted about 5 months, which was a pretty long time given the type of materials that we used. We had a community survey and we also did a traffic assessment. So as part of the outreach, we had a very robust outreach, but again, as ending, there's never enough outreach. So we published an article in our Glendora report, which goes out to each resident. We hand delivered notices to residents and business owners along the corridor, several social media posts, informational signage, as well as, in-field engagement. What we found, and Danielle can talk about this in the Q&A section, but we conducted manual counts from February to March. This was counting during the demonstration as well as afterwards. In total, we had 781 people that were counted, which is pretty good given the fact that Glendora Avenue was closed for 4 of these 5 months. And this also too, given the fact that, it was a pandemic, so people were home and may not have been able to walk around as much. So really what we found is that even with the closure, there's still quite a number of people that use this corridor. In terms of the community survey, given that we can't have in-person meetings, we went to an online format. We promoted this through social media, our website. We had A-frames out on Glendora Avenue with a QR code so people could walk by, scan the survey link, and take it right there. Active SGV was also great. They text banked and also emailed for us to get the responses up. In my opinion, this was a staggering response. We had 573 people take the survey, which was incredible. It gave us a very high confidence level and a pretty low margin of error. So we're pretty confident that the results of the survey reflect the community's attitudes. What we found is that the strong majority use it to get to the village or to local businesses. And that number goes up. Our post office, I will say, I've never seen a post office as busy as Glendora's with people driving in. It's also very small. So that's been an issue for us too, is just the traffic volume and flow through there. We found that nearly 60% would consider walking or biking to the Gold Line, and also 53% had a chance to actually experience the project either on foot or on bike. About 54% of the changes were better, about the same. There were 46% who felt the improvements made it worse. And what we heard from that primarily was confusion and aesthetic issues. And what they didn't quite understand is, what is a demonstration project? And this gets into the outreach, is spending that time before we put out a demo project about what is a demo project, why the materials are going to look not as good as the final product, and also to explaining what are the different improvements. Parking was also an issue, and the turn radii, we did put out curb extensions, and so that obviously narrows the turns, makes it a little bit harder for cars to just zoom through an intersection. And there also was a general concern about traffic. This was a lane standardization, so we did reduce 1 lane on the northbound side to fit in the bike lane. What we did here though, and it was interesting to me too, were the top improvements. One is crossing improvements. For those that are familiar or maybe unfamiliar with Glendora Avenue, it's exceedingly wide, particularly given the volume of the street. So really having safe crossings was important. The bicycle lane was also the second most, and then street lighting. Glendora does not have great street lighting in this section. So that was something that we agree really needs to be addressed. In terms of traffic assessment, this counted using a video camera, both vehicle and bicycle and pedestrians. The build looked at with the demonstration, and the no build was without the demonstration. This was conducted the last couple weeks of March. What we observed here is that there's still relatively low volume even with the reopening of Glendora Avenue. In fact, it actually dropped a little bit after it was reopened. Some of that we think has to do with the Glendora Avenue being closed for about 6 to 8 months. People had already diverted traffic to other streets and then just kept their commute patterns and didn't come back once Glendora Avenue was reopened. Speed was relatively consistent at 33 miles per hour, which is pretty fast for a main street area. So based on all the data that we collected and the NACDOT urban design guidelines, the protected bike lane is the correct mitigation or correct facility for the street, because for a number of reasons. One is that it is the safest you can do for on-street biking for children, for people that may not be comfortable riding a bike. It also provides the strongest protection and reduces collisions between bicyclists and drivers. Now, in terms of the lessons that we learned here is that angled parking was incredibly valuable. I can't tell you how many times I was yelled at just for losing angled parking. And even though there's very low parking demand, I think it was the perception of losing parking was very important. So really, I think that was something that we'll carry through in our final design as a way to fit in the angled parking. The turn radii, you know, Glendora does not have any curb extensions, so it was quite a change for some drivers who are used to whipping around turns to not be able to do so now. We also learned the left turn pocket was very popular and helped mitigate some of the traffic. And then I think, you know, this is true in every city. You want your projects to look the best. And I think a lot of the resistance to this project can be overcome if we design it properly and have, you know, landscaping or a project that looks really good. Now, in terms of the approach, as I mentioned, the outreach was absolutely critical for us. And I think that was something we can always do better on. So really, you know, probably spending about a month or two beforehand, reaching out to the residents, business owners, and in general, just educating on the demo project and what is first last mile. It was also very important to have staff on hand. Me and my staff, we were out there at least once a week fixing the bike lane. As mentioned, the temporary materials come up relatively easy. So it was very labor intensive over that 5 months to maintain. We also learned a lot about the different material durability. And I would say for anyone who's considering a demo project, be mindful of the materials. And I'd be happy to provide any input offline on kind of what we learned in that regard. So next steps is to look for funding and also to maintain dialogue with our stakeholders. We found that the real value of this project was engaging with people who really did not know what first last mile was or what the city was planning on. And really that's helped us maintain some momentum going forward with our planning and design. And so with that, I'm sorry, Alex, I can take any questions the committee has.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And let's see, are there any questions for Mr. Matier from the committee? Oh, I'm sorry. First, let me go back and ask Alex, were there any public comments for this item?
No public comments, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal requests. All right, we're good to proceed.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Matier? Okay. Not seeing any. I think, you know, this is a good demonstration project. I will note that, you know, when we redid Las Tunas here in San Gabriel, and it was funded by a Metro grant for complete streets. It included, you know, those curb bulb outs to allow for bioswales underneath there. And so, you know, residents were crying bloody murder for, you know, a little bit like, oh, why did you do that? And, you know, it's in the way, I can't make the turn, you know, but eventually they got used to it fairly quickly and it was, you know, no longer an issue. But it, like you said, anytime that there's maybe a little bit of a change, people think that it's something that is being done for no reason or is nonsensical or something like that. But once they understand it, then it's you know, it's fine and we adjust. I think you mentioned something there about the value of parking and I was curious, did that come from the businesses or did it come from the residents?
Primarily from the businesses that were there. There's a couple that are mostly office space along that corridor. There are a couple businesses that are like a pet grooming. That's more of a kind of, you know, drop off and go quickly. So I think having more, I think in their mind, parallel parking was very difficult for some people. And so that plus also potentially losing a few spaces was something that they weren't really comfortable with.
Interesting. And as part of demonstration project, did you have to, you did have to remove some of that parking?
Yeah, we lost about 40%. But as I mentioned, there's very low parking demand, so it was not noticeable. There's never a time when, you know, parking was oversubscribed on the street.
But this was also during the last year, during COVID shutdown as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even before COVID, we've done traffic or parking assessments, and there's still very low demand for parking down there.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Alex, let's move on to the next item. And here we have, I think, Judy Gerhardt from Metro here to present on some of Metro's homelessness services and initiatives.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite. I'm fairly new to this role. I've been here a couple months. So I brought my training wheels with me. I have Carlos Rico, who is a community liaison officer. He specializes in the homeless outreach efforts. And so you'll see him on this meeting with me. But I have to tell you, I may be able to get through this by myself because this is one of the things that brought me to Metro. I'm really passionate about this, and I'm really passionate about collaboration. I want to make a difference. And so just real briefly about me, I came via the LA County Sheriff's Department. I spent 40 years there. I retired as a commander in November. My journey through the Sheriff's Department, I started as a civilian dispatcher right out of high school, kind of made my way up through patrol and custody and court services, and taught the drug prevention program for a while. Was the director of human resources for the Sheriff's Department. And then as a commander, I worked in transit for the last several years of my career. So one of the other things that I think makes this so important to me is while I was with the Sheriff's Department, tragically, I had lost 2 nephews about a year apart to opioid addiction. And because of that, I took the lead for the Sheriff's Department to look at how law enforcement was going to respond to the particular crisis, because it didn't really fit anywhere. So I used that analogy in this topic as well, because when we look at the homeless issue that's facing our communities, whose problem is it? Well, the reality is it's everybody's problem. And so I'm really proud to work for an organization that understands that wants to be a collaborative partner in how we address it, and has given me the opportunity to really reach across the silos that we often find ourselves in, and to work with our city county partners in moving these initiatives forward. So with that, let me give you kind of a little quick history. We can go to the first slide. So in September of 2020, we did a count. I wasn't here then, so they did a count. This is kind of what the count looked like on the rail system. You can see the morning average was about 600 on the rail system. In the evening, around 600. The trend indicated that it appeared that people were coming kind of inbound into the city area in the morning, and then kind of outbound from the city in the evenings. The gold line particularly here, you show about 11% of the homeless population was determined on the gold line. Next slide, please. So breaking it down, you can see that as I just mentioned, that on the train, the numbers are kind of higher in the morning, pretty average, pretty split almost evenly between the trains and the platforms, and whether they were counted on the train or whether they counted on the platform, seeing that 37 and 62% ratios. The breakdown you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of AM and PM shifts in the station, and AM and PM shifts on the trains. So, I mean, it's hard to look at these numbers and wonder what we're going to do about the problem, because it's so vast. But I think it's important that you see, these numbers, 400, 300 people really are impactful. Next slide. We did a count in November of 2020 on the bus. They actually did 4 different counts. They did a count at 6 a.m., at 6 p.m., at 2 a.m., and at midnight. The one line I think that this committee would be concerned with was that line 180. I think that runs from Hollywood, Pasadena. So you'll see about 4% of the homeless population was determined to be on that line. Some of the things I've heard about bus ridership is, you know, the homeless population feels safer on a bus at night than they do out in the streets. And so that's where we'll find that high population in the evenings in the early morning hours. So I know the question here is, what are you doing about it? Next slide, please. And I think that's everybody's question. They asked me this question in my interview: what are you going to do about impacting the homeless population? And it was hard for me to find an answer then, and it's hard for me to find an answer today. But I'm certainly committed to continue to look until we collectively come up with a way to positively impact this problem. Next slide. So the Homeless Action Plan, there was a task force that was created in 2016. They had a study done, and then I'm sorry, I'm not sure of the date for the Homeless Outreach 2.0. It's kind of where we are now, where we've expanded the outreach teams and the shelter beds. We've added more partners to the mix to help us house unhoused people. We planned on doing the quarterly system-wide homeless counts. Unfortunately, COVID impacted that, so we haven't been able to do one of those counts, but I know that they're planning one in the near future. We are exploring an ambassador pilot program that will work with our outreach teams. The ambassador program is now under the consideration of the Public Safety Advisory Committee. So we're not exactly sure what their vision is for the ambassador pilot program, but we're hoping that it will contain a portion of ambassadors to work with our outreach teams to assist our mental health clinicians, as well as the bus outreach teams. So what's not on the slide and what's informal and unofficial, I'll just tell you, is the Judy's Program 3.0, because I am pushed up my sleeves, ready to jump in. I deal with this every day, all day. I am committed to make a difference. Somehow, some way, we're going to make it better. And so we're going to move on to the 3.0 program as soon as I get my feet solidly put on this ground. So next slide. Some of our outreach partners that we deal with PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. PATH provides multidisciplinary outreach teams. They have workers that specialize in mental health, substance abuse, and generalists that coordinate with law enforcement to ensure that the most vulnerable are offered support and services. They do medical triage, referrals to interim housing, shelter, benefits and support. They have hotel vouchers or services. They all often come back and follow up with somebody who has been placed, depending on somebody's level of acuity and how severe our struggles may be. They'll work with Department of Health Services to determine the best placement for them. They're generally stationed at terminus points, so North Hollywood, 7th and Metro, Santa Monica, Union Station, and Long Beach. I can anticipate the question here. What about APU? And so we'll get to that. I promise I didn't forget about you. LA Door is a city-based organization through the city attorney's office. Their health-focused preventative approach that engages homeless individuals suffering from addiction or mental health issues who are at elevated risk of recidivism. As you can see here, they address these issues by prioritizing mobile outreach, pre-booking diversion, and engagement over the traditional criminal justice system approach. Having come from the criminal justice system for the last 40 years, I recognize that many people who suffer from mental illness or addiction often end up in the criminal justice system because there was no other place for them to go. And that's not the most effective answer, I don't think. And so I appreciate that we're looking at other alternatives. Next slide, please. More outreach partners include the Dream Center, which is an LA-based, faith-based organization that provides outreach services, particularly at Union Station on Friday nights, offering social services to those who are willing to accept services. I think that that's particularly important. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. willing to accept services. So we make hundreds of contacts every day, but what we find is that the large majority of people that we contact don't want services. And so what in the addiction world, it's very similar. We call it a window of opportunity. And that's why this relationship and rapport building is so critically important, because we have to capitalize on when that window of opportunity may open. So somebody who is suffering from homelessness or experiencing homelessness may decline services 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, but on the 11th time, they may be willing to accept services. So it's that constant and continuous contact, that building of relationships that really is effective in dealing with people who are suffering from homelessness, hoping to catch them at the moment where the window of opportunity is open. They can get into a shelter where they can get additional services that may be necessary for them. UHRC, the Unified Homeless Response Center, is LA City's command post, if you will, of a collection of resources that are varied to impact the problem. So there includes outreach teams, sanitation crews, law enforcement, city, county, and state partners working hand in hand, all in the same room under the same roof. I've met with them several times. I think their approach is very good. I want to expand that beyond the city, because I think the key to solving any problem at this magnitude is really about collaboration, working with our county and city partners, so that we're all moving in the same direction. We want to make sure that we are making the most effective and efficient use of our resources, not competing with one another, but rather collaborating with one another. Next slide, please. So one of the law enforcement partners are doing in this, we actually have several teams across the system. LAPD, of course, in the city of LA has their HOPE teams, where they work with mental health clinicians from Department of Mental Health. And they respond to situations involving unhoused individuals on the system. Then they'll work with the other resources, LAHSA or UHRC or PATH, to provide resources and referrals to meet the complex needs of those unhoused riders. The Sheriff's Department's MENT team, the mental health evaluation team, focuses in the areas outside of LA City. This picture is a little bit incorrect in that the MET team deputies don't respond in uniform. The MET team deputies respond in soft clothes. They really focus on that relationship building. They also respond with a clinician. They're focused on building rapport, establishing relationships, helping people get services or shelter that they need. The goal of this response model is to reduce incidents of use of force, avoid unnecessary incarceration of those people who are severely mentally ill, and often those people that are experiencing homelessness on our system are often suffering from mental illness. So they're able to either place them in a shelter, get them to some services. Sometimes they'll focus on family reunification. They were been able to reunite people all across the country, and even people outside of this country that suffered. Somebody was traveling, I believe, from South Africa, suffered a mental illness episode, found themselves on the system and distraught, and the MET team was able to reunite them with family through a series of collaborative efforts. So the MET team, again, really focuses on building relationships, building rapport, looking for that window of opportunity for somebody who is ready to get help when there's help available. Next slide. So Operation Shelter the Unsheltered is the ongoing effort that we're working with PATH and through those other resources that I mentioned earlier, the Dream Center and LA Door. This is really to disrupt the pattern of people experiencing homelessness that are using the rail as an alternate shelter. They provide outreach services for those people who are willing to accept them. So they'll try to get people off of the system beyond the turnstiles, and they'll assist them at that point. Again, I mentioned the areas that are at Union Station, 7th and Metro, North Hollywood, Long Beach, and Santa Monica. So we've just extended the Shelter the Unsheltered program for another 2 years. We hope to expand that in the future. Our relationship with them is very important and very valuable. Next slide, please. So next step. So the big question is, what are you doing about it? What are we going to do about this problem? So next slide, please. So these are some of the things that we've been working on. Again, the findings with law enforcement on our outreach partners is really about that collaboration. Strategies to address the homelessness on the bus. The bus is a real challenge for us because they're not centralized. It's hard to reach out to people when they're mobile. We do quarterly homeless count studies, and the methodology we talked about. Once those counts are back going again, that will give us the baseline, and it starts, really with a metric of what the problem actually is. I'll tell you that I heard the number in LA County. It's something like 70,000 homeless, 70,000 people experiencing homelessness throughout the county. And so it's a very complex problem. It's going to require a very complex solution from a lot of entities coming to the table. The technology solution that we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about in the next slide if I can. So this is a little bit about the Judy 3.0 issues that I'm really pushing my team here to explore new and innovative and creative ways, and not to be afraid of thinking outside of the box. So one of the things that we talked about, which actually came from the good work of SAPC, the Substance Abuse Prevention efforts from the Department of Public Health, they have what they call a bed availability tool. So we're hoping we can somehow replicate that, where we can have a system where all the shelters throughout the county can log in on an application of some sort and list what beds and what criteria those beds that the beds that they may have available and the criteria they have. So maybe if it's for a female with a child or a male with a child, or maybe it's a bed for somebody suffering from addiction or somebody suffering from mental illness. So we can have an application that filters out for users exactly who they're trying to place and where those locations might be. So we're exploring that. We want to intervene early and often. So we're really trying to look at root causes for homelessness. Part of the survey, the customer experience survey that's going to be happening in the near future is going to include the homeless people who are experiencing homelessness in that survey. So I've asked them to extend the survey to talk not just about safety, but also about how people got to that point where they're experiencing homelessness, so that we can look at root causes and maybe try and address those root causes as well. I think we want to, of course, prevent homelessness, but also early intervention gives us the best chance of success. I think when somebody is experiencing homelessness for an extended period of time, it becomes very habit forming and harder to adjust. So we want to intervene early and often. We want to identify those root causes so we can address those on the very front end. We really want to focus as much as we can on family reunification. You heard me talk a lot about bed availability. We all know in the broad county area with a population of 70,000 people who are experiencing homelessness, finding shelter for that many people is really challenging. So we want to look at other alternatives, maybe not just a shelter, but maybe a family reunification. If we can get somebody into treatment where they're receiving services and they're on their medication or whatever it is that they need, where they can be safely reunited with family, I think that that's a really positive outcome. As I stated before, we recognize that this is a very, very complex issue, and it requires a very, very complex solution. Metro is committed to being a valuable partner in that. We've committed a lot of resources, both a homeless outreach team, as well as financial resources to be a valuable partner at the table, because this is a community issue. Metro is part of the community. We want to be effective, and we want to do what we can to help people who are experiencing homelessness that find themselves on our bus and rail system. We recognize that it often makes other riders uncomfortable. We recognize that it often makes other riders feel unsafe. And our responsibility is to create a positive ridership experience for all. So we want to be a part of the solution. We want to do what we can. I am personally committed to this. My staff knows it. We talk about it every day. I am hoping to expand our team in this arena so that we can even be more effective. My goal here, and my staff has heard it many times, my goal is for Metro to be the leader in how transit agencies across the country deal with the homeless population effectively, compassionately, and caring. We want to be caring, and we want to be empathetic, and we want to provide services. We want to make sure that we are respectful in everything we do, but we want to address the problem. So with that, I will boldly and bravely attempt any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Judy, and thank you for all of your efforts and the presentation. Are there any questions from, oh, I'm sorry. First, Alex, did we receive any public comments for this agenda item?
No public comments received, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal requests. All right, we're good to proceed, sir.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Peter from Monterey Park.
Thank you, Judy, for the presentation. And I know that the homeless issue is quite a problem, and it was a few decades, I could say, that it started, some time ago, and we don't expect it to be resolved in a short period of time. But in our city of Monterey Park, we kind of experience like when you cleaned up one area and then another homeless camp was set up in another area. So it's kind of like you get rid of this side, and then on the other side, it started another camping again. And then we see the pretty much the same persons, the homeless persons in the area. And we have the experience that we get them into a shelter, and then within a few weeks, they came back again. And so my question is there some long-term plans that really can resolve the problem? And we understand that the mental illness problems and the drug addictions, and those are creating a lot of problems. And how do we address, the core problems that cause the homeless? And then, of course, the housing. I don't expect you to answer the whole thing, but just give me some kind of, insight, or what kind of short-term or long-term solutions that you will come up with. Thank you.
Sir, I wish I had the answer to that. I think that, to your point, moving a population from an encampment from one area to another isn't a solution. And we see that happening both at the local level. They may move from one street to across the street. They may move from one city to another city, but all we're doing is moving the problem. We're not solving the problem. That's not an effective strategy. We've seen that really across the state and across the country. We've heard that people got one-way bus tickets from, Tennessee to California. And again, that works for Tennessee, but it doesn't work for California. And we don't want to be a contributor to the problem. We don't want to just move the problem to somewhere else. We really want to be a part of the solution. And I think that, unfortunately, we can't mandate that somebody accept services. We can't force them into a shelter. They have to be willing to go there. So it's really that slow and steady continuation of offering of services. What we found to be very effective is that, as I mentioned during the presentation, is that rapport building where they can build trust, where they realize that they're going to get help. And I think that the services that are being offered from Department of Public Health and Department of Mental Health, Department of Health Services are very effective. It is just very long-term. It is a slow but steady process. What we want to do is we want to make sure that people who may be suffering from addiction know that there is help available for them and catch them at that window of opportunity where they're willing to accept that help, embrace their treatment, and move on to live a very productive life. That's ultimately our goal. Same thing in the mental health arena. I think in my experience has been in the mental health arena that if we can get people into treatment where they can get either medication or behavioral treatment, whatever the answer is, we can get them stabilized and then provide them opportunities where they can have a productive life. I think people who are suffering from addiction or mental illness need hope, and they need to know that somebody cares about them. And I think collectively in this very large community that we call LA County, that's what our responsibility is. We really need to offer them hope. We need to let them know that we care about them, and that there are services available for them so they can get better. But mental illness and addiction are very, very challenging. I'm certainly not an expert in those arenas. I spent a lot of time talking with and presenting with people in the addiction arena. So that's how I became very familiar with it. But I feel like there's many parallels in homeless population, mental illness, and addiction. And I think the one thing we need to constantly strive for is to offer them hope, that they know that they can feel that they can get better, and that they have a hand up and a help up that we are all collectively going to help them get there. But I think moving the problem from one city to another or pushing them out of one area into another area isn't really a solution, and it's not really being collaborative. So that's not a focus that we're going to go to.
And additionally, lately in the news, especially in the local news, there's a lot of confrontations and conflicts among even the homeless, and confrontations between the homeless and the residents in the areas. So how do you, resolve those issues? I think it's getting pretty out of hand now.
Yeah, sir, I hear you, and I understand the concern, and it is appropriately based. It is, it's unfortunate. It's sad for me. I don't want anybody in our community to be fearful, but it is a cold reality. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that that's not true. It is true. So from the law enforcement side, from the security side, we talk a lot about de-escalation training. We do a lot of training regarding how to handle somebody who may be suffering from a mental illness crisis. In the community, certainly we want people to be aware of their surroundings. We want people to recognize when somebody may be in a crisis and may be suffering, give law enforcement a call for those incidences, because they are the trained professionals. They're ready to deal with them. They may be able to bring mental health counselors with them. But what we don't want is members from the community attempting to engage somebody who may be in a state of crisis.
Thank you.
I think the answer is really awareness.
Okay.
We have to be attentive to our surroundings and recognize that when somebody is in a crisis, they may not be rational, and in those situations, they can be dangerous. And so let the trained professionals come in and handle those.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Judy. Any other comments or questions? We are getting close to the end of our time here, but seeing none. Again, thank you, Judy, and all of the efforts that Metro is making in this area. And I'm sure we will continue the conversation, especially as Metro moves towards that Fairless initiative that has been coming up for so long. So we'll look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have the executive director's report. I'll do first to Alex. Are there any public comments with respect to the executive director's report?
No public comments received, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal requests. All right, so we're good to proceed.
Okay, Marissa, please.
I just have two quick announcements. I want to thank everybody that was able to attend our webinar that we hosted jointly with the Economic Partnership earlier today. And Stephen from Glendora actually pulled double duty for us because he presented some additional stuff on what Glendora has been working on at that. And it was a really great opportunity to hear about what Glendora and Pomona were doing in terms of some temporary street improvements to look at on-street dining. So I think it was really great to hear, and then to additionally hear the other first last mile work that they're doing. So I want to thank everybody that attended that and acknowledge Alex. He's been very busy today, as always, and he was hosting that webinar. And then I also want to note that our VMT RFP, I think we presented on that last month or the month before. That went out last week. We plan to award the contract sometime this summer, and the work should be done next August. So I just want to alert you that that is now out for bid. That's all my report.
Great. Thank you, Marissa. Actually, could you also just provide a quick update for the committee here with respect to being dark next month?
Oh, yes. The plan is that we will be all committees, I think with the exception of capital projects, will be dark next month. And that is, although we've gotten some clarification about the extension of the Brown Act exemptions, we still want to have an opportunity to prepare. We do plan to continue having these meetings virtually based on the preferences of the committee. And our understanding is that the governor's order will extend through the end of the calendar year. And after that, we'll deal with anything we need to related to Brown Act. But we will be dark next month. We will be back in August, but we will continue to meet virtually.
Thank you, Marissa. Okay, next item, liaison reports. Let's see here. Alex, any public comments with respect to the Metro liaison report?
No public comments received, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal request. All right, so we're good.
Okay, I believe Mary Lou will be presenting this report.
Yes, rather quickly, considering the fact that our agenda today was contained a lot of things about Metro. Most importantly, our budget was adopted, which included our Metro projects, particularly our ACE, the Gold Line, and of course our transportation study. Stephanie Wiggins began her career at Metro on June 1st, which is critical. The FAIR initiative, there were motions from various members, and after a lengthy discussion, the sentiment was to put some things in place and sort of slow it down a little bit to give the CEO Wiggins an opportunity to take a look at it. They will be reporting back in July with some of these initiatives. Most importantly was to make sure that our municipal operators were held harmless and that there would be funding. Nothing has been set in stone yet so that its recommendations are coming forward, but it is moving ahead, probably primarily in the community college area. And with that, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, with the exception, Metro is dark in August.
Okay, got it. Foothill Transit, Alex, any public comments for Foothill Transit?
No public comments, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal request. Yes, we'll proceed.
Yeah, go ahead, Yoko.
Hi. So I have a few, just a couple announcements. So starting July 1st, in an effort for Foothill Transit to help the community recover and help businesses and the economy have a lot more regional mobility, we're going to have our first ever pass sale, so a summer pass sale, and all passes that we have, 31-day passes and one-day passes, etc., will be at 50% off starting July 1st for 90 days. And that's an effort to try to help those, everybody was it's been a challenging time, especially for our riders too. So we're hoping that this helps riders, and this also helps businesses get more people just flowing back into places, especially as, you know, things open up next week. So starting July 1st, we're going to launch a 90-day sale. We're going to cut pass prices in half, facilitate pass use with the free tap cards, etc. So please look out for that. We don't have that out yet, but the information should be pushed out on our website and social media outlets pretty soon. And the next update I have is that, well, there we go. We have our double deck buses. I know it's been a long awaited thing. We have them in our possession, and we should be launching them sometime this month. So be excited. You're going to be seeing the first ever battery electric double deck buses put into public service in North America when you see them. So more on the actual date, but please look out for them and help celebrate with us. And that's all for Foothill Transit.
Awesome. We'll be doing a ceremony when the first day of service.
You know, so we haven't done anything. Everything is up in the air in terms of what it means when everything opens up. So of course we wanted to do a lot of things you know, we opened and launched the Covina Transit Center, and we never got to do that. So we're still planning on what that means to safely celebrate with everybody, and we're still trying to be a little mindful of that. So we haven't finalized the plans just yet.
All right, please keep us posted. Gold Line Foothill Extension Construction Authority. Alex, any public comments for that item?
No comments received, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal requests. All right, we're good.
Okay. And who is there? Let's see here.
Thank you, Chair Pu.
Ed, okay, Ed, go ahead, please. Thanks.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share the design work is nearly 100% complete from the Glendora to Pomona project, and the authority is about 1/3 complete on the at-grade crossings. The project is nearly finished relocating the freight track throughout the city of Glendora, which is the longest of the 3 segments. The authority was recently given one more month of freight service track outage. So that means that service may begin as soon as July 1st, but crews will work to expedite the relocation of the freight track throughout the project corridor while not needing to be impacted by those areas that are not needing to be impacted by daily deliveries. The authority also appreciates the COG support letter to the state supporting a request to fill the project funding gap needed to build to Claremont and Montclair. Several letters have been sent in throughout the region, and if awarded and received by October this year, the authority will initiate the contract option with the design build contractor and have them build the entire 12.3 mile 6-station project altogether. Boy, that would be something. Thank you all for that time to share the information on the Gold Line.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Ed. And Metrolink. Alex, any public comments for Metrolink?
No public comments received, and we'll give a few seconds for verbal requests. All right, seeing none, we're good to proceed. And we don't have any Metrolink reports today. Right,
that's what I had thought. Okay, perfect. So as Marissa mentioned earlier, the July committee meeting will be canceled. We will not be meeting next month. So you will all have a good opportunity to get some rest and enjoy the summer. We are reopening, and the state anyway is declaring reopening within a few days. So I'm sure we'll all also be busy in our respective cities handling that and determining when and if, I think some cities and city councils have already gone back to in-person meetings, and but also reopening of city halls and other public facilities. It feels like a good opportunity here for us to, pause and appreciate the fact that we've made it this far, and hopefully can take it to the end here to put this entire pandemic situation behind us. So the next Transportation Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, August 12th at 4 p.m. via Zoom. I thank you all again for your participation, and again, enjoy the time off, the break. I'm sure the staff will definitely enjoy that, and we'll see you all in August. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye, guys. Bye.